Hey everybody, welcome back to What's Better Than Great. This is Mike.
And Shauna.
And today we're going to talk about something that I feel like is going to be a very important topic. We're talking about how to use the law of attraction effectively. So
what is the law of attraction, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times people, when they hear that, I think it's marketed. What I usually see when I look up the law of attraction on Google is usually, how can I manifest more money?
Right.
Or it has to do with relationships. Like, how can I
attract my ex back?
That's the one I see. Yeah. Or attract my true love. It's always having to do with something external, really. Most time, it's either about relationships or money.
Right.
So I think
we wanted to talk about this today because we wanted to kind of dispel some of the misconceptions about what the law of attraction actually is and what it would require for you to be able to manifest and attract things consistently into your life.
Right.
So let's dive into this I just want to tell this story, right? So how we even got to this point of wanting to talk about this was because we were talking to our daughter and kind of trying to help her to understand how the law of attraction actually works. And it made us kind of go into a deeper conversation together that led us to believe that, we believe that most people are thinking, like we said, about money. Attracting money or attracting something basically out of a selfish desire. Right. And so here's the thing. Let's talk about this first.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree necessarily with that it's necessarily selfish. I wouldn't use that word necessarily because it's all, if you think about it, it's all about yourself. You know what I mean?
Well, I guess
when you think about it, you can't. When it comes to the law of attraction, I've from what I've read, you can't manifest something for somebody else. It all is about the self.
Well, I guess what I mean when I say selfish desires is more egotistically driven desires, not something that's based on what I believe the real law of attraction is trying to show you. So anyway, let me just say this. So if you know what the law of attraction is already, or at least believe you do, then you probably have either read or watched The Secret. You might
read articles.
Yeah, read articles about it. And most of the time, what they tell you is to think positive thoughts,
right?
Raise your vibration,
attach emotion to your thoughts. So it's like think it, feel it, and then take the steps to do it, and then
manifest.
And then there's one other part to it where it's like when you take the steps towards it, then you kind of have to let it go. Like let go of the result, as in have faith that whatever you believe in, the universe, God, is going to bring it to light.
Right.
So a lot of times the last part of it is the most difficult part for most people because they're like, well, how can I let go if this is something I want?
Right.
So I think the thing about that is that people believe that I guess
it's a trick to get things.
Right. It is that it's some sort of magical thing that happens when in reality it's you becoming the type of person that manifests that could manifest that.
Right. It's the reverse of what, in my opinion, it's the reverse of what most people believe or think about the law of attraction, which is that all I have to do is think positively, and it will come to me. I think that what it's really about is changing. My belief is that it's about changing the way that you see yourself, and how you see yourself is what creates your actions. You know what I mean? And so I feel like that's a part of the problem that people run up against when they think about the law of attraction, especially if they're not manifesting. They get frustrated. If they feel like, well, I want this and I've been being positive and doing this and it's not working. A big part of the reason why it's not working, I believe, is because you think about it from a perspective of almost like I just have to change the way I think, or change the way that I do things. But it's not external, it's internal.
Right.
So now that we've covered that, I wanted to go into how to actually change the way you see yourself. But we'll get to that as soon as we get done with the word from the sponsor. Did you know that 32% of Americans listen to podcasts monthly? It's a great way to start a business and share your thoughts on anything you want. Unfortunately, the cost of podcasting equipment and the challenges of editing and distributing your podcast is usually what stops people from getting started. That is until Anchor.fm. If you haven't heard of Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will also distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, it can be heard on Apple Podcasts, and a whole lot more. You can make money from your podcast even without having a listenership, right? It's the easiest way to make a podcast. It's everything you need all in one place. So if you're ready to get started with your podcast, download the free Anchor app right now or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's anchor.fm. All right, welcome back.
All right, so now we're going to talk about how to change your self-image in the context of the law of attraction. So I believe that the first step in changing your self-image is trying to figure out what is your self-image. So to do that, I think that you have to do some introspection. Right. You know what I mean? For me, I do my introspection by writing. And basically just describing myself, you know what I mean?
Like
if I had to be outside of myself and I watched how I interact with people and I watched how I emotionally handle situations, or how I, the things that I like, the things that I don't like, you know, what makes me excited, I'm describing myself. So I can get a baseline, and then figuring out what I want to manifest and what type of person would I need to be to manifest that.
Right.
Because again, I don't believe it's something that's some magical thing that gets us what we want. I believe it's you becoming the type of person that would seek that and would be successful in getting it.
Right.
Meaning that you would persevere through anything to get to your goal.
Right. So I think that one of the good things to think about too is that, so the way I look at it is this: if you are, I tend to always go to video games in my way of thinking about it, because of the fact that I kind of grew up playing video games, and that was what helped me to really try to understand it. But I think about it from the perspective of, my character has certain abilities, right? In my character, I mean me, my body, the person who I am, right? And in order to gain new abilities, I have to put this character through certain things, right? But in order to even do that, I have to also examine where I am starting from, because I know that there's certain ways that certain things that I do now that don't fit into the lifestyle of where I want to be.
Right.
And so there's a replacement of this habit versus that habit. You know what I mean? So now we're going to address the elephant in the room. Right? How do I use this to make money? How do I use this to attract the person that I want to date? Or how do I bring my ex back with what you're talking about?
Yeah.
So to me, I think that the real thing is, you can attract what you want until you become the person that you need to be, right? So if you
get what you want, to manifest that.
So if you think about it like this, right? if the law of attraction says that you are attracting things like a magnet, then you have to also understand that it's not it's they say vibrations, right? But what is a vibration when you really boil it down to the essence of something useful and understandable? It's really about your thoughts, your habits, and the things that are like your goals, right? So if you want to attract money, and let's just make this as straightforward as possible, right? You want to attract, let's say you are a janitor right now and you're like, okay, well, I would like to be a millionaire, right? Mm-hmm. How you would attract this, if you put it into a very simple layman's term, I need to have a skill that is valuable enough to really get me $1 million. Now, could being a janitor do that? Yes, but not the way
as
that
fast
you approach
as you may have want it to be.
Well, you can't approach it from the perspective of I'm going to go to work and save money and become a millionaire. You have to approach it from a perspective that is different than maybe just the straight line, get a job, pay my bills, save, and invest. You know what I mean? You've got to... so, for example, if you're a janitor, you're going to have to learn a skill maybe of business, because you can start a janitorial business that could potentially make you $1 million if that's what you want, right?
I think that also, if you don't know what it would take to become that, looking at people or researching people that are millionaires, if you don't know what the first step would be, to doing that, if you don't know what you would have to be, then you would have to look at somebody that is what you are trying to be.
Right.
So you know how they did it.
Exactly. And this is my thing about the law of attraction, is that ultimately how this relates to how you view yourself, right? And what your self-image is this. If you see yourself as someone who is a failure, you are literally, it's a what do they call it? A self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Right? If you see yourself as someone who is a millionaire, you just haven't made the money yet, or you don't have the money in your bank account yet, then you are the type of person who will persevere to get to where you
will act in a way that will get you to that place. And I think a part of it is, and it really is the steps that is described, whether you if you read The Secret or you read articles, you have to, have a thought, have the emotion. The emotion drives you. That's what keeps you motivated. And then you have to put in the work. You have to start. You can't just sit around and expect things to just magically appear for you or manifest for you. You put in the work. You do your research. You find a role model. That's who you want to be.
Right.
And then you believe it. And I think people, it is faith, but I think that also is what keeps you in the game, what keeps you in the race.
Right.
Is having faith that it will happen. I believe is having faith in yourself that you're able to accomplish it.
Right.
So.
And I will say this, because this is something that I see a lot of people post about online that is, I believe, detrimental to people who are actually trying to use the law of attraction. A lot of times, so on social media, when I was more active on social media, what I noticed was that there were a lot of self-help pages and stuff like that. They would always say, set a goal, shut up about it, and just work, right? And that's not actually how this works, right? So yes, you should work, but I think that a part of what you have to understand is that you have to speak about it, right? Because anything that you want, someone else has, right? So think about it like this. And let's take it out of the context of money and put it into dating, because I think that that's another part of the law of attraction that people misunderstand and end up using it against themselves in a way, is if you were trying to date someone and you had an ideal person, the problem is that you're too busy trying to attract somebody who would make you complete, instead of you saying, I am this person, right? That means that I have to treat myself and set the standard of saying, I will not allow myself to be anything less than the person who I want to attract.
Right.
Right. So if you want somebody especially for the ladies and the men. For example, if you're a man and you're like, I want a woman who could cook, who's a good, who could clean, who could do this, who can do that, who can do this. You need to do that.
Right. You have to be the type of person that woman would want to be with.
Right. And vice versa, women. If you're like, I want a man who's got a great job, who already is established, you need to do that as well. You can't, if you attract someone that isn't you, then they will quickly be able to see that you and them are not on the same vibration or the same frequency, right? Meaning that you are not equal. You're not able to hold on to something that you're not equal to. And so you lose this person and you are not quite noticing that it's because you never saw yourself as worthy of it, right? You never saw yourself as worthy of it. So I would say, be what your self-image has to be in line with what you want to attract, and you have to be able to speak it into existence, right? Meaning that if I see someone that I'm attracted to, I can't just be like, oh, look at her. She's going to want me. And I'm not going to say anything to her. You've got to be able to say, hey, you're very attractive.
Take a step.
Can I take you out and get to know you? Right? Something to...
And that faith is what gives you the confidence to... Because you know what? Sometimes you'll see an opportunity and you'll act on it and it won't necessarily happen. I think people get really discouraged when it doesn't because they're like, well, this is what I wanted and it didn't work. So this whole law of attraction thing is a bunch of BS. Right. And it's not necessarily true. It's just that wasn't the instance that wasn't what it... I can't articulate what I'm trying to say. But okay. That wasn't meant for you. You know what I mean? And every time that you take a step, you may have obstacles that come up, you know what I mean? But I think, again, with the step that it talks about letting go of the result and just having faith that will happen is continuing with the confidence that you will get what you want. Right. So you can't get to a point where you you see an opportunity, you take a step toward it, it doesn't work out, and then you lose confidence in yourself. You just have to say, okay, well, maybe that wasn't meant to be. Let me continue to take steps.
Right. And here's the thing that I think that is valuable to kind of use to understand, because one of the most common things I hear and see people say either online or in person is, well, I tried this law of attraction thing for X amount of time and it just doesn't work for me. The reality of it is that you can't try the law of attraction. It is already in place.
Yeah, it's happening whether you want it to or not.
Yeah, and so if you're not attracting what you believe that you want, it's either that you have something that needs to change in order to get the result that you want and that moves you closer to it, or you actually have a block. Right. And this is what I believe, is that you can have things that are a limiting belief that are deeply rooted in you that kind of counter what you believe that you want. Right. And this is something that I've experienced for myself. I believe everybody, for the most part, has some hurdle that's deeply entrenched in who they are that they have to get over. So that's what we'll talk about in a moment.
All right. So in the last segment, we talked about the self-image in the context of the law of attraction. I think that we should elaborate a bit more on how to change your self-image. And I believe it comes from, like we discussed, doing some introspection, figuring out what your self-image actually is, and then really thinking about how did you get this particular self-image? And I think it comes from how we were trained as children.
Right.
And this is something we were talking about with our daughter was, the people that we interact with a lot of times are, especially when we're younger, are the ones that shape our self-image, because we don't really know who we are. We kind of base who we are on our relationships, on the people that we interact with and how they react to us.
Right.
So I think it's really important to go kind of reminisce, really go back in time and think about, okay, where did I learn this about me? How did I get to a point where I started to think of myself this way?
Right.
You know, if a part of my self-image was that, you know, I'm really good at cooking. It could have came from, you know, your mom teaching you how to cook. You cooked a dish and then she was like, man, you know, this is really, really good.
Right.
You know, or you had consecutive reactions to your cooking that were positive, you know, and the same thing goes for something really negative. And so I think that the steps, again, doing some introspection, figuring out what your self-image is, and then going back and figuring out how did it start? What was it? What interaction that did you have that implanted that idea that you had about yourself?
I think that what also helps is so this is for me what I had to do to even start to recognize my own self-image was, what I did was I started to really listen to the words that I said when I was speaking without thinking about it, right? So for example, you could be in a situation where, let's say that you are at your job, right? And somebody says, hey, we need somebody to stay longer, right? And we'll pay overtime, but we just need somebody to work an extra 4 hours, right? Your instant emotional and mental reaction to that is a part of your self-image, right? Your self-image is almost always an automatic response, right? So if you hearing that would make you feel like, nah, you can forget that. I ain't doing that. Well,
Yeah.
what is that self-image? Who are you by saying that, and why are you saying it that way? Mm-hmm. Also, if you're the type of person who, let's say if you're in that situation, but you also have a new child at home, and you've got a spouse that, you know, has been asking you for help a lot, and your first reaction is like, hey, they'll get over it. You know what I mean? Why is that the reaction? It's really just being able to hear your reactions or hear the conversations that you have and what the things that you say imply about your belief about how the world works. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that's really what helped me to really start paying attention to who I thought I was or who I saw myself as. Also, it's about your self-talk. You know, one of the things we talked about with our daughter is that when you get older, you know, she's a early teen, but we told her that, you know, when you get older, the problem that most adults run into is that you hear the internal dialogue and you believe that it's you. Mm-hmm. But the reality of it is that all of your internal dialogue is, generally speaking, something that someone else said about you and that you believed and reacted to emotionally. Now, I'm saying this so that I can reiterate that this is still the law of attraction being used. You had an experience and had an emotional reaction, and because of it, that's who you became. You started to see yourself as this person. Mm-hmm. And the only way out of that is to really dive deep and say, is this true? Do I actually believe this? Is this something that is beneficial for me to believe if I want to be the type of person that you want to be?
And I think that it's easy to do that as far as changing or questioning, you know, whether you believe it or not, by looking at the reactions that people have toward you or interactions that you have that speak the contrary of what you believe. Because I think a lot of times for instance, if you're, you know, I know this has happened to me a lot. I'll be at work and everybody will say I've done a great job. And then there'll be that one person that says, oh, you suck, or, you know, question you or whatever. And you'll harp on that one person instead of thinking about everybody else who said, well, you're doing a great job. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think that's what most people do. And so you base how good you're doing on that one person instead of thinking about all the reactions that you have to the contrary. So I think especially, you know, when I was younger and I was like in my mid-20s, I really had to undo the way I thought about myself because I was trained to believe I was a certain way. And then I got around a group of people that were very supportive. And I was like, well, people don't react to me the same way. Like that way I was thinking about myself must not be true, you know? So I definitely think that going back and really identifying where you got that, you know, that thought about yourself, where did it originate, and then questioning that is really important. And I think a lot of times we have to sort of change our story, because I think it's easy. Once you do that, I think it's easy to kind of blame people. Well, this is the reason why, you know, I turned out like this, you know, but you got to be very careful about that, because you don't want to put
any blocks up for yourself.
Right. Put any obstacles in your way that would continue to validate that story.
Right. And see, this kind of leads to what I wanted to talk about too, which is that we do at times have emotional, mental blocks in changing the way that we see ourselves, changing our self-image. And almost every time it's that there's a grudge that you're holding either against someone else who you feel like put you in a position of less, right? So somebody can say your parents or your brother or sister treated you badly as a child, which is, you know, that's a story that a lot of people can relate to, is just being in a situation where they didn't feel that they were built up, right? And we can oftentimes hold grudges against these people. But the problem is that holding a grudge against them also is disempowering for you. Mm-hmm. You can't make them be different. Right? You can't force them to see you in a different light. You can only see yourself in a certain light. The same goes for how you would judge yourself because of it, right? So if someone sees you negatively, let's say, for example, somebody says, you know, hey, you're a failure. You'll never be this or that, right? The problem is that most of the time we seek to defend ourselves, right? But unconsciously, to defend anything, you have to agree that their statement could be true. And your emotional reaction to it is what attracts it. Mm-hmm. And so the problem is that by even defending yourself, you are automatically accepting it as a part of what you attract into your life.
Right.
So in order to change your self-image and get rid of these emotional blocks, you have to let go of grudges, which essentially leads me to something that I wanted to tell you guys about, which is an ancient Hawaiian prayer. I believe it's called Ho'oponopono, if I'm pronouncing that right. And this prayer is all about radical forgiveness, mm-hmm. right? So I'm going to give you the mantra. I'm actually going to make a YouTube video that you can find on our YouTube channel. But the prayer in English is something like this: I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. And if you can just do this consistently, right? You don't have to necessarily just do this with the people that you feel maybe looked badly on you or who you feel like held you back in life.
Right.
But do this with yourself. Even if you're just laying in bed and about to go to sleep and you go over this in your head, it is a way for you to release the
burden,
the bondage of holding a grudge and
all
the
that
guilt.
negative energy and all the negative thoughts we have, because you attach yourself to these negative thoughts of yourself. You have the emotion behind it. That is what is manifest. That's what caused you to become that person.
Right. Which
in turn manifests all the things that you don't want in your life.
Right.
So the key thing is changing that self-image. And I think that mantra really does help us to kind of rid ourselves of all the negative thoughts we've had about ourselves that are self-limiting.
Right. And it's really interesting when you really dive into what these statements are saying. When you say, I love you, right? I'm essentially saying I'm grateful, mm-hmm. right? I'm grateful for you, even if you are somebody who I feel like may have hurt me. And I'm grateful for me.
And I care for you.
Right. I'm sorry, right? Meaning like, I'm basically, this is like repentance, right? I don't like to use that word a lot, because of the connotation that people take. But realistically speaking, seeking forgiveness is something, it's a cleansing act. You know what I mean? Please forgive me, right? Is the same thing. And then saying thank you is another great gratitude thing. And so you're really trying to cleanse yourself of this negativity.
Yeah.
And you're trying to be grateful for the fact that you are able to be forgiven.
Yeah. And gratitude is a very powerful emotion to have. When you have gratitude for anything, I believe that you're attracting more of it.
Right.
If you're truly feeling that way. Now, you can't just be like, I'm grateful in a cynical way.
Right. You do have to release
really
it.
feel gratitude for yourself and for your journey and for everything that you're grateful for in your life.
Right.
Every positive thing that you have in your life.
Right.
It could be something as simple as, your bed or your breath or your health or, whatever positive thing you have.
Right.
So
I agree. I think that ultimately your goal is to release people from the captivity that you believe that they are under. Now here's the thing that is really, to me, once I understood this, it changed the way that I thought about all of my negative emotions towards people and all of my grudges toward people for good. What I understood was that while I'm holding a grudge against somebody or while I'm angry with someone, and anytime I hear their name, I get this emotion. It made me realize, like, they may not be thinking about me, right? They're off doing their own thing and living their life,
own world,
and I'm actually the only one experiencing this pain, and they are free,
right? And
so ultimately, really doing this mantra and forgiving people, radically forgiving people, even if you don't feel like they deserved it, no matter how bad what they put you through was, forgiving them is actually a way of freeing yourself. Freeing yourself and letting go of the things that you've experienced and actually accepting that, yes, this is a part of my experience, but that's what makes me valuable, is that my experiences are now fruit for someone else to flourish from.
Right. And lessons to learn. And that's one of the reasons why I always look at every negative thing as a lesson, because instead of looking at everything bad that happens to you and seeing yourself as being a victim, you empower yourself and you say, okay, well, what did I learn? Because then it becomes, instead of a negative situation, it becomes a positive experience, because now you have wisdom and you can share that information with somebody else that may be going through the same experience. So yeah, I think that what do we do? Just elaborate on how to change your self-image.
Yeah. So to kind of round it up, right? You have to first examine yourself, right? Know what your current self-image is, and really examine your beliefs, your self-thought, your self-talk, your thoughts. Examine who you're around, and ultimately, I always like to go through the process of saying, after I've spent time with someone, or after I've taken an activity or an event on, once I'm done with it, I examine how I feel energetically and say, do I feel energized or do I feel depleted? And if I feel depleted, I know that it's not something that is good for me, right? Now that's going to be individual. It's not something that I could tell you, stay away from this person or that person. No one could tell you but yourself. But I think that is the beginning of starting to shift your self-image into someone who can be the person that that will attract what you want. And if what you want is something that's material, like if you want financial success, if you want something that is financial in nature, you have to approach it from the perspective of a skill, right? Attracting a skill and the role models, and people who can help you, right? Which means that you have to open your mouth. You have to speak,
right?
And talk to people who either you could help or that could help you, or that you can learn from.
Right.
And finally, I think that if you struggle if you struggle with any of that, a part of what you have to do is understand that those struggles are actually most likely blocks in the way that you see yourself. And the hard part about that, in my opinion, is that you can overlook it if you're not always constantly listening to the way that you're reacting to things, emotionally, verbally, mentally, right? You have to be constantly watching
yourself.
Yeah, watching the guarding the gates of your heart, right? If to use a biblical term, guarding the gates of your heart, and understanding that what's being said causes a reaction, partially because of the fact that you believe it, right? And if you don't want that belief to be the thing that holds you back, then you have to re-examine where it comes from, and ultimately if it is still a valuable belief for you in the transition you're trying to make in your life. Hopefully you guys have gained a lot from this video. I'm very glad that we were able to make this for you, or excuse me, not video, but podcast. If you want to listen to the Ho'oponopono mantra, you can check us out on YouTube. It is the same name, What's Better Than Great. Also reach out to us on Instagram at What's Better Than Great, and you can DM us any questions you have or anything like that, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. This is Mike.
This is Shauna.
And thank you for tuning in. We'll talk to you guys next time.